Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called My Friend, Mr.Ducky, written by Teller of Tall Tales. We were always told not to go into the forest, not because of dangerous animals or fear of getting lost, because that is where the old ones and the machines lay. I was always a curious child, however, even more than usual for a little young cow girl. The trees, with their rich brown trunks and swaying green needles, seemed to beckon to me with their swaying branches. Dreams and fantasies about finding one of the old ones that I could bring home to my village. The elders spoke about tales of the machines, the size of great cities, passed down to them by their leader. With each story, all I could wonder was how preposterous our village would be with the knowledge of the old ones. For as long as I can remember, that question plagued my young mind. I remember my first excursion into the forest as though I had just returned from it. A plague had decimated the village's crops, leaving many homes, including mine, without food for the winter. I could feel the first nip of the winter's cold as I awoke that wondrous morning. I did not have breakfast on my way out of my family's small mud brick home. There was nothing to eat. Instead, I grabbed a water skin from behind the woodpile where I had stashed it earlier before clambering over the fence and sprinting towards the tree line before anyone could spot me. Heart thrumming, legs pumping, I ran deep into the forest, spurred on by the hope that maybe something of the old ones had survived, something that could help us. But as the forest grew deeper and darker the farther from the village I got, I began to feel afraid. The elders' stories about towering machines were far from a comfort now as I glanced through the trees. At any slight noise in the darkness, my fear spurred me forward, making me run deeper into the forest until I was just well and truly lost. Collapsing against what I thought was a square stone jutting out from the ground, I began to cry. I knew going into the forest was foolish. Everyone knew that. But I had to try and be brave. Try and save the village on my own. But now I was lost, and the thought of never seeing my parents again shattered what little hope I had left. "Who are you?" The voice made me jump from the skin and press my back against the rock for protection as I frantically looked for the source. "Behind you." The voice spoke again, and I leapt away from a gaudily smooth rectangular rock. Staring at it, I noticed that there was a small horizontal slit with a hole above in the rock's face that wasn't there before. Shock turned to fear, then jubilation, then back down to terror as I bowed before the strange device.
"My name is Miss Color, Great Machine. I did not mean to disturb your sacred slumber. Please have mercy."
There was a poignant silence after I spoke, a feeling like being watched from every angle washing over me. It felt like hours, but must have only been a few minutes before the machine spoke again. "Rise, child. What is it that you need?" Sitting upright fast enough that I almost knocked myself backwards, I begged. My village, a plague is killing our crops. We don't have enough food for the winter. Please, we won't survive without your help." Another poignant hint. "How many souls are there?" The gentleness of the machine's voice surprised me, giving me a moment to think before replying. I don't know. It could be more than 1,000 if the other villagers also have been struck. It's a large favor to ask." I was cut off by a loud hissing noise, jumping back as the ground beneath my knees began to yawn open with a metallic squeal. A massive circular metal platform slowly rising into view with two large tube-shaped bags set neatly upon it. 2 battalion-sized emergency ration packs issued. Follow the photographic instructions on the canister to prepare. Do not expose canister to an open flame. Unable to believe my eyes, I dove for one of the bags, snatching it away before the machine could take it back. Surprised at the light weight of the bag, I gingerly take the other one, and remembered I was lost. The machine seemed to have noticed my distress, asking bluntly, "Are you lost?" I could only nod as I held back tears. there was something hard and sharp in my throat, blocking my words as I stared off into the boundless forest. A soft hum filled the air. A blue light bathed the nearby foliage. Wonderment made me turn around in spite of my fear. Displayed inside the dense mist that seemed to emanate from the platform itself was a three-dimensional map of the forest, laid bare before my eyes. Scarcraft detected, a congregation of heat signatures, 2 hours due south, population estimate to be previously mentioned levels. A large blue arrow appeared in place on the map, pointing to my left. Hurry home, your parents will worry.
How will I find you again?
I blurted before covering my mouth as a poignant silence filled the forest. Call my name and I shall answer. The voice was almost stern in its coldness. If I had been any less curious or any more fearful, I never would have asked my next question.
Oh, what's your name?
Designation MAL-LARD. P-75, Mobile Autonomous Landship, Long-Range Artillery, Reconnaissance and Defense Platform 75. I looked at the strange, smooth rock curiously, unsure how I would remember such a long name.
Well, what did the old ones call you?
The machine's pause was not like the ones before. It was longer, almost reclusive. I could almost sense a kind of sadness in the pause, like when a bead breaks off your necklace and you only notice after the fact. They called me Mr.Ducky, after a type of wetland bird from their home planet.
Mr.Ducky,
I whispered gently before looking back in the direction of my village.
I'll be back, I promise, Mr. Ducky.
I shall remain here. Hefting the surprisingly light bags, I began running home, hoping against hope that these two admittedly small bags could feed the village through the winter. Mother was crying when I returned, my father's face twisting in anger. Then terror, from where he consoled my mother as he spotted the strange green-colored bags I carried. I had to spend the rest of the day convincing them to at least try the food of the old ones, despite my own skepticism. Eventually my father relented and retrieved a few pails of water, dumping them into a tin tub before gingerly setting one of the fist-sized canisters into the water and jumping back like it might explode. To his credit, the canister almost immediately began to violently hiss, boiling the water and producing a thick cloud of steam that had the three of us cowering behind the fireplace. Then a loud whoomp. A pillar of yellow, streaming hot, sponge-like bread grew from the tube of water and launched the now split-open canister to the ground a few inches from the tub. A rich, sweet, citrus-like scent filling our small hut as we stared in awe. I was first to impulsively grab a fistful of spongy material and shove it in my mouth, almost unable to swallow in surprise at how delicious it was, tasting similarly to the sour yellow fruits we harvested from the river basin, but so much more sweeter and softer, reminiscent of New Year's cake. The glee with which my father helped me carry the remaining canisters and tub of sponge was a happiness I'd seldomly seen from the stoic farmer. He even had his throat puffed out, revealing a deep blue hue. When the elders first laid eyes on the canisters, they could scarcely believe their eyes, holding round them like schoolchildren as they each tried to decipher the old one's language stenciled on the side of each canister. I even saw a few dipping their hands into the tub of sponge-like cake, sampling it with an awe in their eyes. As they did so, they begged me to regale them with my story about meeting Mr. Ducky. Perhaps that is why I remember it so well. I must have told the story a dozen times by the end of the day. Something I remember just as well is the feast we made from old one's canister food. Simply by submerging canisters in water, we were treated to meat and vegetables we had never before laid eyes upon, and were wholesome nonetheless. A food I particularly remember from that night was a legume paste that the elders had deciphered was mashed potatoes. Well bland on its own, with a few pinches of salt and some sour cream, it was divine. To think that all of our surprises, the canisters lasted through the winter with food to spare. Our hunters started using the strong metal of the canisters to make spear tips and arrowheads that were much lighter and sharper than the flint ones we had previously used. By the time spring poked its head around from beneath the covers, an ugly problem reared its head once again. The plague on our crops had not been cleansed by the winter chill. The first of our squash grew stunted and withered, rotting from the inside like they had summer before. The elders beseeched me to take our infected crops to Mr. Ducky, in the hopes that the old ones had a cure for the disease. Approaching the forest's edge, I couldn't help but fear that Mr. Ducky wouldn't respond. But with the whole village watching, I called out his name at the top of my lungs. Immediately, a small trail of blue lights appeared, leading me deeper into the forest. Heart pounding with excitement and necessity, I sprinted along the trail laid by the lights, dodging gnarled tree roots and odd stone formations until I reached that same oddly smooth grey rock. "What is it you need, child?" I heard him ask as gently as I laid a sample of each of our infected crops on the ground before the stone and stepped away.
The plague infecting our crops is back. It's back, and we hoped that the old ones might know how to help.
With a hiss, the ground with the crops sank into the earth, replaced by a smooth metal plate. I heard a soft whir and rumble from beneath my feet before Mr. Ducky spoke again. "The infection is a simple blight. Burn your fields with the crops still planted, then till the ashes into the earth. Cover your fields with mulch before planting to prevent the blight from reoccurring."
My heart fluttered with relief as I bowed to the stone. "How can we ever repay you?"
One word was all that Mr. Ducky stated in response. "Prosper." Such a simple word, spoken by a machine, no less. I would not recognize its significance until much later in life. Returning home and relaying Mr. Ducky's instructions, the entire village set to work burning the fields to ash, then retilling them. Me and the other children helped spread the mulch by running around and throwing fistfuls at each other while snorting with laughter. But by the end of the week, we had sowed new seeds, and we just had to wait. My waiting was rewarded tenfold. Squash so large they collapsed under their own weight. Bushels of grain, so numerous my father was sending runners out to other villages asking to help with the harvest. And the berries. I had never had berries so tender and sweet before, bursting on my tongue with the slightest pressure. We were all given time off for school to help our mothers harvest every last berry from the bushes. I was praised, of course, for making contact with the old ones and bringing about an age of prosperity. But till the credit didn't belong to me, every time someone thanked me in a hushed voice, I could only glance at the tree line. Truth be told, I felt bad for Mr. Ducky, alone in the woods. Wouldn't he be scared? I hadn't seen it before, but I don't think he could move. What if some mean wild animal knocked over the smooth rock we talked through? Those thoughts were what drove my nightly benches into the woods, finding out that if I even whispered his name, Mr. Ducky would show me the path. "I have no need for shelter," he had bristled as I set up a simple canopy I had brought with me to shelter the smooth rock from the rain.
"Wouldn't it be nice to be out of the rain for a little while?"
I knew I had him thinking when he paused for several minutes, allowing me to finish the canopy. "Yes." I giggled softly and adjusted the canopy so it wouldn't get blown away, before sitting cross-legged in front of the smooth rock.
"What were your people like, Mr. Ducky?"
I questioned, curiously, expecting a long pause. "Brave. They were brave." Words came so quickly, I thought I had misheard for a moment. Looking at the circular hole in the stone, I gently asked,
"What happened to them? Where'd they all go?"
This time there was a long, long pause. "They fought a great enemy, so you wouldn't have to." Sadness bled into the otherwise monotone voice of Mr. Ducky.
"You seem to care for them a lot."
"As they cared for me." The melancholy in his voice struck with me like a ragged cough on my walk back home, making me pick solemnly at my food until I asked my father the burning question.
"Papa, what were the old ones like? Why am I the only one allowed in the forest?"
A troubled, thoughtful look came over his face as he set down his spoon and folded his gnarled hands. "Our ancestors spoke of how they could will the very air to shred the enemies in gouts of fire and shattered metal. Machines that could crush a village underfoot if they were careless. Tales of metal obelisks that roared like gods and spit retribution just as divine. They told us to not tread into the woods, lest we provoke their wrath." He paused, licking his lips and taking a drink of water. "But they are just fairy tales, traditions, after all. You described Mr. Ducky as just a strange, smooth stone, right?" I nodded slowly, poking at my food, unsatisfied with the answer. Months passed, and I found myself spending more and more time in the forest with Mr. Ducky, simply telling him about the happenings in the village and extracting every tidbit of information about the old ones that I could. His simple voice drew me in with every new story the old ones had told their children, according to Mr. Ducky. Those months quickly turned into years before long. I was a young woman. That was when Mr. Ducky asked me his first question. "Do your people prosper?" I looked up from the berry basket I was weaving. "The village has grown. We have more time for leisure since we figured out irrigation. With your help, of course. We even have a blacksmith now. Why do you ask?" "I wish to leave a legacy worth leaving." I glanced at the little circular pot curiously. "Come on, Mr. Ducky, you haven't aged a day since we first met." The little black slit stared at me, the pause growing uncomfortably long. "I fear there will come a day that I must rise from my resting place. Time has wrought damages upon me. You are both too small and short-lived to see. Should that time come, I shall not be able to stand long." A soft nod was all I could offer in response, thoughtfully finishing the berry basket and setting it on top of the smooth rock. "This is for you, in case you feel like collecting any berries." Mr. Ducky didn't respond as I packed up my remaining materials and began to trek home. His words stuck with me again, like they had all those years ago. What was out there? Who would try and hurt us? We hadn't done anything to anyone. I got those answers all too soon. The entire village was woken up by shouting in the town square. Jumbling past the crowd to get a glimpse of the commotion, I laid eyes on a terrifying sight. Rod, one of the many runners between villages, had collapsed beside the town well. Large portions of his scales had been burnt off in an unnatural way. Through his pain, he was shouting frantically, "Purple demons! Purple demons!" over and over again, until, with a ragged gasp, he went limp. The entire village attended the council meeting that night, whispers of fear mixing with those in doubt to create a heady mixture of paranoia. And, as always, right in the middle of it all, was me. "Take the young Herod's body to the forest. Speak with Mr. Ducky. Find out who did this. Find out what we can do to stop them." Growl's voice shook with grief. Herod was her grandson, and a good young man on top of that. To die in such a horrific way, I could only imagine how hard it was for her to hold herself together. Taking the sled's handles, I solemnly, dutifully hauled Herod's body to the forest. I didn't need to whisper his name as the blue path to the strange rock lit up. This had once been a place of joy. But now I only felt dread as I approached the smooth stone beneath the canopy. Resting the sled on the platform, I stepped away before kneeling at its edge. "Who could have done this?" My voice cracked as I asked the question. "An enemy you were never supposed to see." A broken laugh slipped from my throat. "What are we going to do? How can we even fight back?" There was a cacophonic bang from beneath my feet that made me yelp in surprise, the sound echoing through the forest. The very earth seemed to tremble beneath my knees. A steady hum slowly growing louder and deeper until it all faded away. Somewhere, far in the distance, I heard a crackling of falling trees. "Go home, Miss Scholar, and tell your people not to look out their doors tonight. If the enemy wishes to proceed, they will do so through the forest." I looked up both fearfully and confused. "But it's easier to get here from the south road." "They will travel through the forest if they wish to proceed. Go now, and take these. They will ensure your slumber remains undisturbed." A slot on the stone hinged open, revealing a brick of pink-coloured pills having pictographic instructions to only take one. Nodding slowly, I took the pills and trudged back to the village. I had no option but to trust Mr. Ducky. He had never let us down before. Why would he now? We held another feast that night, using the rest of the canistered food from all those years ago. A bit of brightness in the dark and dour pall hanging over our heads. For dessert, we had the delicious sponge cake before taking our pills, and heading to bed more tired than ever. I woke up to utter chaos around the house. Anything not nailed down or tied down had fallen to the floor. Wandering through the mess, I could only but feel that something was considerably different today. Sun streamed through the kitchen window that normally faced the, Where was the forest? Running out the back door, I could only see a crater as deep as a mountain, was tall as spot as the forest had been. Slowly turning around, I saw the softly waving treetops on the opposite side of town. The pace was slow in my stupefied state, following the dirt path from the village centre all the way to the forest's edge. The other villagers slowly grouped around me, staring like I was, at the neat pathway covered in the small stones that stretched through the forest. We all flinched at what sounded like distant thunder broke through the trees, alongside an odd, faint, crackling, popping sound. I very suddenly realized a great many things about the mysterious Mr. Ducky. Stepping forward, I called his name.
Mr. Ducky.
I almost wept with joy at his monotone voice breathed back through the trees. MAL-LIRD. P-75 Mr. Ducky standing guard. All systems functioning normally. I could almost cry with joy as I called out. I thought time had crippled you, old man. If a machine could laugh, I'm sure Mr. Ducky would have in that moment. But he never did, allowing us to return to life almost as usual. We had avoided destruction, blight, and starvation, all thanks to Mr. Ducky. Now, dozens of years later, not even the youngest children fear the forest like I once had. Freely frolicking amongst the trees, knowing that if they were ever to run into trouble or lose their way, they could simply call out to my friend, Mr. Ducky, and know they'll make it home safe and sound. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.